ଏତେ ଲାଇଭ୍ ପଡିଥିଲା ନିକିର ସେ ବ୍ୟାଙ୍କକୁ ପଠେଇଥିଲା
The Adult Shift programming teaches us lessons way beyond the realms of engineering. Greetings to all, this is Karipra and I'll be your host for this evening. Well, data structures and algorithms is considered to be the root of computer science, yet most of us tend to skip learning DSA because we feel it's quite complicated and we fail to understand its profound uses in various walks of engineering. Without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Mr. Shashi Bhushan Kumar, Tech Lead and Instructor at Geeks for Geeks. And honestly, it's quite fascinating how they put everything under one umbrella, be it an interview-based question or a simple array program. Mr. Shashi is now here with us at SRM student branch at CONCEPTO for a crash course on DS and algorithms, how to crack technical interviews. Here's the gist about him. He has worked with Adobe Sign Integration team as a full-stack developer and is also a pro in JAX-RS, Spring Boot, Hibernate, and Java. He is enthusiastic about solving problems and has a deep passion for competitive programming. Let's get started here, and there's a note for the audience. Please put all your questions in the QA section and it'll all be addressed at the end of the session. Once again, we are delighted to have you with us, sir. Off to you. Again, sir, you may take the session.
Yeah, sorry, I was disconnected for.
That's okay.
Okay. So in this session, I'll talk about like how you can crack your interviews, technical interviews for normally software engineer roles, right? So, and I'll talk about the importance of DS and Algo, like how you can learn these things and how these things are helpful to crack your interviews, right? I'll also talk about, on-campus placement and also how you can get a job through off-campus placement, like how you can apply through LinkedIn, how you can apply through websites like Nokia.com or InstaHire. Then what are the things important for resume? So I'll talk about everything in this session. And so I'll finish my stuff in first 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session in which you can ask your doubts, your questions regarding placement or regarding DS and Algo. So that's the agenda of today's session. Okay. So first of all, if I talk about, the type of companies that we have, the type of software companies that we have. So the one is service-based company like TCS, Infosys, Accenture, HCL, Wipro. So these companies basically provide services to to their clients, right? And then on the other hand, we have companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Adobe, Flipkart, Paytm, Oracle. So these companies are known as product-based software companies. So they build their own product, and that's why they are known as product-based software companies. And if I talk about the differences in the work culture or the work quality, these product-based companies have better work culture and better, I would say, code quality or the work quality. Okay, so you should, your end goal should be to join these top companies. These top product-based companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google. Yeah, and of course you can Google about the other differences, right? Like they have some salary difference as well. Like these product-based companies pay really well if I compare with the service-based companies. Okay, like for an example, let's say, like normally when TCS visits a campus, they pay around 3 to 4 LP if they are hiring through normal on-campus interview. Again, if you are getting a job through Code Vita, then your salary can be in the range of 7 to 8 LPA or 9 LPA. I'm not sure about the exact figure, but this is the range. But on the other hand, if you talk about the salary offered by Amazon, right, they pay around 30 LPA, right? 30 LPA to a fresher, right? So there is a huge salary difference between these two types of companies. And these differences are reasonable, right? So in this webinar, I'll talk about like how to crack the interviews of these product-based companies, right? Because they have a little different interview process, right? So let's talk about like how many rounds they conduct when they visit a campus. Then what is the process of off-campus interviews, and what are the questions or what are the topics they consider or they ask in the interviews, right? So normally, like your first round will be online machine coding round on HackerRank or HackerEarth or on any other website. In that round, you can expect 2 or 3 coding questions. Coding questions means those questions will be based on DS and algo mainly. And that's where DS algo is important. So if you don't know DS and algo, if you don't know how to solve a problem using a non-algorithm or by applying, or how you can optimize some solution by applying the appropriate DS and algo, you'll not be able to crack that round, right? So in the first round, in the first coding round, you can expect some coding questions based on DS and algo. Apart from that, in that round itself, you can have some MCQs based on aptitude, based on OS, networking, DBMS, or C++ output, or Java output, right? But again, you should know. So apart from DS and algo, you should know the CS fundamentals, like a language like C or C++ or Java or Python. And apart from that, you should know the basics of OS, networking, DBMS, OPS, right? So you should know all these things. So once you are done with your first online coding round, you will be called for the face-to-face technical rounds if you are done with the first coding round. So in those face-to-face technical rounds, like you might have 3 to 4 technical rounds, and in all those technical rounds, okay, so the one thing that I will suggest you to, you can simply go through, you can simply search like interview experience of, let's say, Amazon or Facebook or Google or Microsoft, to know like how many rounds they conduct and what are the questions they ask in these interviews, right? So in the face-to-face rounds also, they will be asking questions on DS and algo mainly. So they'll be asking coding questions. Like if I'm going to show you one example. Let me share my screen and quickly show you one example. I hope you can see my screen. So it's a very common interview question. The question is print left view of a binary tree, right? So you'll be given a binary tree like this, and you will have to print the left view. So left view nodes which are visible from the left side. So it's a very common interview question, and to solve this, you need to know the basics of binary tree. If you don't know what is binary tree, you will not be able to solve this question. Apart from that, you will have to use queue, because you need a queue or similar DS so that you can solve that problem, right? So, I mean, without knowing queue or without knowing trees, you will not be able to solve this problem, right? And apart from that, you will have to write the complete code. So they expect, like, you'll have to write a function like this in any language, like C++, Java, or Python, but you'll have to write some code like this. Okay. So yeah, so it's not only about DS and algo, it's also about your problem solving skill. It's also about your coding skill. Like sometimes you might be able to solve a problem, or you might be able to apply the proper DS, or you might be aware of that DS and algo, but if you don't know how to apply that DS and algo to solve that, that's a, I mean, you'll not be able to crack the interview, right? You need to apply them properly. You need to write the complete working code. Working code means the code should be bug free. It should be covering all the corner and test cases, right? it should be compilable, it should be runnable. Like it should not have, I would say, bugs. Or of course you can have, like, your code can have some syntax error, that is fine, but your code should be like, it should cover all the test cases, it should cover every corner case, right? So you'll have to write production level code. That's very important. So that's where coding skill comes. I mean, coding skills means converting your logic to a code in using any language, right? So that's also important. So you should know how to convert a logic in code, right? Like sometimes writing code of trees might be complicated because you'll have to use recursion, you'll have to use other things. So yes, I mean, these things might take some time to practice. Yeah, so I was talking about the face-to-face rounds. Like in this pandemic, companies might not visit your campus, right? So they are conducting virtual interviews. So again, the virtual online interview can. So again, the medium will be different. Like initially, it was face-to-face. Like the company will visit your campus, and you will have the interview face-to-face, right? But right now, it might be virtual. Like you will have to give the interview on Google Meet or Skype or Zoom or any other tool. But again, the questions will be same. The level of questions or the level of or the expectations of the interviewers will be same. Only the medium will be different. Like you will have to write the code. You will have to talk about the solution, right? So in all those 3 to 4 rounds, the main focus will be on your coding skills, on your knowledge of this and algo, right? So that's very important to get a job. And as I said, apart from coding skills, you should be good at other CS fundamentals like computer networks, operating system, databases, OOPs, and all these things, right? So all these things are important, but the most important thing to get a job is JSON algo, right? Because if you are not good at that, you won't be able to get a job. Apart from these things, you should have at least 1 or 2 good projects on your resume, because I mean, if you have not built something, that means you don't know something, right? So that means you have not applied that knowledge to build something, right? So you should have some project in any language. The project can be on any domain, on any language, on any framework, on any technology. That doesn't matter, but you should have something to show, to write in the resume, right? That's the idea. Yeah. So now I'll talk about the off-campus placement and like how you can learn those skills like JSON algo. Like if I talk about my experience when I was in my college, so I have done a BTech from NIT Allahabad. I was graduated from NIT Allahabad in 2016. So I got a job in Paytm through my on-campus placements, right? And again, I was asked a lot of coding questions, a lot of questions on JSON algo in my on-campus interviews of Paytm. But before Paytm, I had given many interviews in other companies. I was not selected, right? So rejections will be there. I mean, you can't crack all the interviews, right? Or you can't crack your first interview. So, and this is a very normal thing, right? So being rejected in the interviews are very normal. Nothing is that's so. I mean, if you are not able to crack the first interview, that's perfectly fine. The good thing is that in India there are a lot of companies. So let's say if you're not able to crack the first job, then you will have the chance to crack the other interviews, right? So it's totally fine to fail in the first or second or 10th interview, right? Okay, and again, when I worked at Paytm for 1 year and then I switched to Adobe. So again, you can switch to, let's say your dream company is Google, right? And let's say Google doesn't visit your campus, so you can't join Google, let's say as a fresher. But let's say your dream company is Google. So what you can do is you can join any company from your college, right? And then after working at that company for 1 year or 2 years, you can switch to Google. So you can switch your company anytime. So that's, I mean, on campus is not the only thing. You can change your company at any stage of your life, I would say. So yeah, so I know a lot of my friends who have started their career with very small companies, but now they are working in companies like Microsoft, Google. Some of them are in Facebook London, right? So you can crack an interview at any point of time. But the idea is you should know those skills. You should be good at all those things which are important for cracking the interviews, right? Like DSNLGO, which is the most important thing. So if you are in college, I recommend you to learn, the details of DSNLGO, learn how to solve a problem, learn how to write a complete working code of a given problem, right? In any language, you can go with C++, you can go with Python, you can go with Java. These are very common languages, right? Yeah. Let's talk about the off-campus interviews for freshers. Let's say you are in fourth year, you are in final year, and some company, let's say company XYZ, does visit your campus, right? And you want to be part of that company. So how to do that? How to get a job in that company? So the one way is try applying to that company if they have some vacancy for entry level role. So you can apply by going to the career page of that company. Another way could be you can ask for the referral. So you can go to LinkedIn, you can ask someone who is already working there, so they can refer you if they find your profile impressive. Apart from that, if you have a good, let's say, competitive coding profile, or if you have a good open source profile, like you have built some really good project on GitHub, right? So those things will make your profile impressive, right? And recruiters might call you. Like, let's say if you are a 6-star coder at CodeShift, right? So companies can contact you. They can, like, recruiters can call you for the interviews. So yeah, you can get a call from recruiters if you have some good profile at any competitive coding site or websites like GitHub where you have done something impressive. Yeah, so it's little, it's not that easy to get your resume shortlisted if you are if you don't have an experience, you are fresh out of college. So in that case, your skills matter a lot. So you should have something so that you can showcase in your resume, right? So the one way could be doing great at competitive coding. The second way could be doing something great in development, right? You can build something, we can build something impressive, and those things might help you to get your resume shortlisted, right? So that's the idea. Once your resume has been shortlisted through referrals or through anyhow, right? Let's say you're applying directly to the company, and let's say you are lucky enough to get the interview call. So yeah, so the interview will be similar to the on-campus interview. Like you will have first coding round, then you will have, of course, you can have first telephonic round as well, and then you will have again face-to-face rounds or virtual rounds in which they will be again asking questions on DSNLGO. Apart from that, they can ask questions on your projects. So you should have done something impressive. You can do something on AI ML, you can do something on front end, you can do something on back end, you can do something on DevOps, you can do something on security, you can do something on. So there are many domains, and you can choose any domain and you can build something in that domain, right? Or using that framework. So that's the idea. Yeah, apart from this thing, if I talk about like how to learn DSNLGO and how to be good at DSNLGO, again, you can try websites like Gigs for Gigs, where you can learn all things from scratch. Then for practice and for practicing coding, you can again use Gigs for Gigs, or you can use HackerRank, CodeChef, CodeForces, right? So these websites are useful to practice coding, because in the interviews also you'll be told to write some code, so you should know how to write code in that given time constraint, right? So that's the idea. If I talk about the books, you can follow Codeman. So Codeman is a good book for algorithms, but you can study all these things from websites like Gigs for Gigs, or you can follow some YouTube channel to learn these things. or you can purchase some courses if you want to pay some money, right? Yeah, so that's this is the way of learning the DSN algo, but you'll have to practice a lot of questions, and so you can practice questions on HackerRank or Geeks for Geeks, and then you should see the interview experiences of all these companies to know the pattern of the questions, like okay, what they ask in the interviews, and what is the difficulty level of those questions, right? So in DSN algo you should know everything, like you should know arrays, strings, linked lists, stack queue, trees, heaps, try, graph, backtracking, dynamic programming, divide, conquer, sorting algorithms, hashing. So you should know all these things, right? Which is very common for the interviews, right? Yeah. So okay. So now I think we can start the Q&A session. Like I can talk more about these topics if I get a question on that topic. So yeah. So I'm done from my side. Like I have talked the important things. Now I can take some questions and I can talk about, I can answer your questions and I can talk about something in detail if required. Okay, so we can start Q&A now. Okay, like the one question I got from Abhishek is, can you explain in detail about switching companies? Yeah, so you will have to apply to that company, or you can, or in fact, the HR of those companies can contact you. Like, are you looking for a change? And then you can share your resume with them, and then they can call you for the interviews, or you can ask for the referrals. So there are many ways. The first way is to get the interview shortlisted, and for that you'll have to apply somehow through LinkedIn or through any other website, or directly to that company, or through referrals. And once you're done with applying to that job, you will have the interviews, and then you can track those interviews to get the job. Yeah. Which is better in practical use, Hipsort or Quicksort? It depends on the use case, right? Like Quicksort has its own advantage, Hipsort has its own advantage. So it's nothing like a better, right? Like they have both. So both of them have their own, I would say, advantages and pros and cons. So normally we go with the Quicksort because it's simple. It's n-log in average case. Should we prepare topics like try is important for placement. So you can't ignore try. Segment tree you can ignore, but it's good to know. It's good to know your segment tree. But you can ignore segment tree for the placement. Better language for coding interviews. You can go with anyone. Like my personal choice is C++. You also can choose Java or Python, or let's say you can also go with C#. But my personal choice is C++ because it's simple to use and it's faster than Java in some cases. So you can go with the C++. But again, you can go with Java and Python as well. So Kavya is back.
Yes, sir. So the next question is, what sort of books would we refer for DSN algo? What's your choice?
Okay. So again, for algorithm, there's a book called Coreman. Introduction to Algorithm is the book title. It is written by Coreman. So that is a really good book. There's one more book on Algo, which is Algorithm Design Manual. So it's a really good book. So one is Coreman and one is Algorithm Design Manual. So these two books are really good books. You can use any of them.
I have one personal question though. Those books, is it for like a beginner level, people with enough expertise can also have a look into them?
Yeah.
Level of that.
So in those books, the good thing is that like there is something for experts as well in that book. Like you can find some very good details on some topics, right? So if you know the basic, then also you can refer those books for better understanding or for deep understanding of that topic. Or if you're a beginner, then also you can start with that book. But if you're very beginner, then my recommendation will be to start with, you can watch some YouTube videos, because videos, I mean, with the help of videos, you can learn things easily. So there are a lot of videos on YouTube which are, you can watch them in free, and you can learn the basics of a topic easily through those YouTube videos, and then you can go through those books to know the details, right? So my recommendation will be watch some videos from YouTube, then have a look at the websites like Geeks or Geeks, have a look at some code, and then you can try reading some books.
Yes, sir, of course. Okay, there's one question from Pratyaks that says how much important subjects are like OS and DBMS and software design. So this thing we've heard from all of our faculty saying that DS and Algo is the most important stuff when you go for an interview and all. So what about the rest of them?
Yeah, see, I mean, all these subjects are important, like because if you don't know OS, if you don't know how OS works, how OS handles the memory management, how OS creates the threads for us, how deadlock happens, or how to avoid deadlock. So all these things are important actually. And again, the concepts of DBMS, the concepts of networking, all these things are important. So if I talk about the from placements perspective, then apart from DS and Algo, you should know OS, networking, DBMS, and OPS, which includes the software design. Like you should know what is class design and how to design a class and what is the UML diagram. And you should know the basic OPS principle like polymorphism, inheritance, abstraction.
Yes, I've definitely heard that from a faculty. These are very important. Okay. So there's one question from Avi that says how learning DS and Algo increases your passion towards competitive coding. So he's asking about your personal experience.
Okay. So I started learning DS and Algo to get a job, right? Because to get a job, you can't get a job without learning these things, right? So it was not by choice. It was, I would say you have to do coding to get a job. So I started learning coding. I started completely coding job, but I enjoyed that thing. So initially it can be frustrating. Like you might have to spend, let's say, 2 or 3 days on a single question. So that can be frustrating. But after, let's say, few months, let's say once you're done with 6 months, then you can solve the questions easily, right? So yeah, so after spending some time, these things can be interesting. So now I find these things interesting, but initially it was frustrating and challenging.
Okay. There's one question from Stuti that says, what would be the best crash course to help you be confident and prepare the best? And what all topics would that definitely include? Okay, this is one thing I wanted to ask.
Yeah, actually, all these topics like arrays, strings, linked lists, stack queue, heaps, trees, tries, graph, hashing, dynamic programming, backtracking, dividing, all these things are important. Like they can ask questions on any topic. So you can't ignore any topic, to be honest. So if I talk about the crash course, you will have to you can solve some very common questions, right? So you can ignore very tough or very uncommon questions, but you should at least go through the very common questions like finding kth is smallest element in the array, diameter of a tree. So you can find that list of common questions on Geeks or Geeks. So there's a list of around 150 questions which are very common to the interviews, right? Or there's one book called Cracking the Coding Interview by Gale. So there's a book called Cracking the Coding Interview. So that book also contains a list of 195 coding questions. And so if you are able to solve those coding questions, you can easily crack those interviews, because most of the questions from interviews will be based on those questions only. So that is the one thing that you can do if you don't have that much time.
Okay, sir. So the next one is from Akansha. This says the topics in DSA are vast, and that is a very true point. Any tips for revising concepts weeks before an interview? So I think your Gale book can help him to do that, right?
Yeah. Yes. So see, the idea is like you can't complete that book in 1 week. That's the truth, right? So if you're not solved those problems before, then you can't study all those books. But yeah, for revision you can go through those questions. So either you can go through questions on Geeks for Geeks, or you can refer that book for revision. But if you're reading that book for the first time, then you can't complete that book in 1 week. It it might take, let's say, 1 month to complete that book. So yeah, so I mean, for revision, yeah, you can do the revision in 1 week.
Yes, that is one right point. Geeks for Geeks does have a lot of revision questions for the N-minute preparators, and I'm one of them, so I don't know that. Okay, so do we have any more questions from the audience yet?
Okay.
Okay, here's another question from Zach. How long do I spend on question that seems hard to me before I look into the solution? Yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So there's no rule, but my suggestion is it depends like how much time do you have. Like let's say if you are solving a question in let's say you are in second year and you have just started learning coding. So at that time you can spend, let's say, 1 week to solve a question, right? So you can spend that much time because you have that much time. But let's say if you are in the fourth year and your placements are going on, so you can't spend that much time on a question. So it depends on like how much time do you have. So if you're in third year, then you can spend, let's say, 1 day. 1 day means like 2 or 3 hours, right? Because you won't get the full day time because you'll have the classes, you'll have other things to do. So yeah, so you can spend 2 or 3 hours at one question if you have that much time. Otherwise, you can have a look at the solution after spending, let's say, 30 minutes if you don't have that much time.
Yes, sir. So certificates versus projects, which one is better or both of them are the same? That's another one.
Okay, let me tell you one interesting thing. So let's say, see, I mean, I know a lot of my, actually a lot of guys who have certificate from IT, right? They have done BTech from ITs and still they could not get a job, right? So certificate will not help you to get a job, right? I mean, the BTech degree, which has a duration of 4 years, so that, I mean, won't give a guarantee to, for a job. So what about other courses? So let's say if you're doing a course of 2 months or 3 months, so those courses will not guarantee, anything. They might help you to get the interview call. Like let's say if you are studying from some IT, then of course you will have a better chance to get the calls. Like companies will be visiting your campus and you will have more, I would say, more options to give the interviews, right? So those certificates will help you to get the interview calls, to shortlist your resume, but they won't help you to crack the interviews, right? Your skills are important. If you have done some projects, if you know things, if you know how to code, if you know how to build things, then you can crack the interview. So certificates are only for getting the interview calls. It won't help at all to crack the interviews, right? So I mean, that is the idea of certificates.
That's one true thing. Okay. So how do you prepare for a technical interview when you're just 2 to 3 days away from it?
I mean, so let's say if you have not studied all these things, let's say before, then you can't learn all these things in 2-3 days, right? You'll have to, like I started my preparation when I was in third year, because these things might take time around, let's say 4 months or 6 months or let's say 8 months, right? You can't learn all these things in 1 week or 1 month, right? Because to learn all this DSN going to solve all these, let's say 100 questions or 200 questions, it needs time, right? You'll have to spend, let's say, at least 2 months or 1 month to practice these questions. So if you have not studied all these things, then you can't learn all these things in 2 or 3 days. But yeah, in the last week or in the last moment or in the last day, what you can do is you can revise those basic concepts, revise those, let's say you can revise the basic things like what is BFS, what is DFS, what is the basic code of BFS, what is the code of quicksort. So you can simply revise those important algorithms and DS, or you can revise some questions, right? But you can't learn all these things in 2 or 3 days. Right?
Yes, sir. So, is the knowledge of hardcore TSA essential for other roles like cloud architect or associate or data-oriented job? Because we have to keep in mind that not everybody is very good at coding, and like not everybody has a stand on this subject.
Right.
So what do you do in the other case?
Okay. So it's not only about coding; it's also about problem solving. Like you are given a problem, then you will have to solve that problem, right? So that problem solving skill is used in any profile. Let's say you are going to be a data scientist, or you are going to be a cloud DevOps, or you are going to join a team as, let's say, security engineer. So in all these cases, you will have to solve some problems, right? You will have to write some code, right? So everyone writes some code. Of course, you won't be using trees. You won't be writing code for stack and queues because all these things are inbuilt there. But the idea is you will have to write code if you are going to be a developer. Developer means if you are going to be a front-end developer or back-end developer or full stack, or you are going to be a data scientist. In any domain, you will have to write some code, right? So in the interviews, they test your coding skill as well. They test you like, okay, are you able to write the code of a given function? Are you able to think about the solutions of a given problem? Are you able to apply something? Are you able to apply some algorithm to solve a problem? So again, so yes, it's true that all of us can't be good at coding. So in that case, what you can do is you can know the basics of all these things, right? You can know the basics of coding, like how to write the working code of a solution, how to write some very basic common problems, and then you can be expert in your domain. Like let's say if you want to be a security engineer, right? I mean, in cybersecurity field, then you can, like, they might not ask a lot of questions on DS and algo, but at least they will ask some basic questions, right? So you can't ignore DS and algo. I mean, so in that case, what you can do is you can know the basics of DS and algo. You can't, I mean, you can escape the details, or you can escape the tough questions of DS and algo, but basics are required. Like you can't escape completely DS and algo thing.
Yes, sir. So can you also have kindly look at the open questions that's on your right hand side while I'll read out a few of them, and if you find anything interesting, you can answer them also. So here's one question. What kind of projects in specific add value more to one's resume while applying for jobs? This is a general one.
So it depends on the role, right? Like let's say if a company has vacancy for a front-end engineer, right? So if you have done something on the front end, you will have a better chance to get a job, right? So let's say if a company is hiring for ML engineer, or let's say if a company is hiring for someone who knows Python, or let's say if a company is hiring for IoT role, right? So it depends on domain. So like normally, if you are applying for a general SD role, in that case, you can go with any domain. You can build anything, right? Like it's not the case that, okay, if you are building something using JavaScript, then you will have the less weightage. And if someone is building something on AI and ML, they will have the better weightage. That's not the case. Every project will have the same weightage. So for general role, you can do anything. That's fine. But if you are applying to a specific role, in that case, you should have done something on that domain, right? Like let's say if you're applying for a backend Node.js engineer, in that case, you should have done something on Node.js, right? In that case, only you'll be able to get the call. So in a startups, like these things are important. In big companies, they don't care about your framework, right? Like let's say if you're going to join Microsoft, though they will provide you training. So you'll have training of 2 or 3 months or 1 month, and they can train you. They can teach you all these things. So you can learn all these things. But in startups, they don't have that much money. They don't have much time. That's why they don't train you. They want to have someone who have already done something on those domain, right? So for general role, you can do anything.
Okay, sir. So how important is system design for?
Okay, system design has 2 things. One is high level design and one is low level design. So freshers can ignore high level design. So high level design means designing APIs, designing the high level components like servers, API gateway, load balancer. So you can ignore these things as a fresher, but you should know low level design, like designing classes, designing interfaces, applying basic design principles like solid, applying some design patterns like factory, observer, strategy. So you should know the basics of low level design, but you can ignore the high level design, like designing a scalable system or designing load balancer or consistent hashing or those things.
Okay, so Anirban has a question. Any suggestions for non-CSC students getting into an IT company?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of my friends are from non-CS background, like they are from civil, they are from mechanical, they are from metallurgy branch, and some of them are working as a software engineer. Some of them are working in Amazon, right? So you can get a job if you have the skills. So the rules are same for everyone, right? So if you are a non-CS guy, still you will have to learn coding. Still you will have to know the basics of CS, like operating system, networking, DBMS. You should know a language. So things are, I mean, rules are same for everyone. So the good thing is that most of the companies don't care about your branch. If you have the skills, then you can crack the interviews. We'll have the chance to appear in the interviews, and then if you have the skills, then you can crack the interviews. So, and that's the good thing about these interviews.
Yes, sir, definitely. Okay, so there's the next question from Pratyaks, such as which experience is better, working 2 years in a startup and working on building a new project, or working 2 years in FANG and then maintaining the existing one? Which one do you think is better?
Yeah, so actually both the things have their own pros and cons. Like if you are working in a startup and you are building things from scratch, you will learn a lot of new things, right? You know, like, okay, how to build things from scratch, right? And if you're working in a FANG companies, in that case, you might be working on some project which is already there. So you'll be simply maintaining that project or adding some new features. You won't be building things from scratch normally. But again, the good thing is that if you're working in the FANG, you will be working with great minds. You can learn a lot of things from there. You can know like how they are doing such great things, right? So yeah, I mean, so both these things have their own advantage, and you can go with any of these two paths.
Here's another versus question: CLRS versus CTCI. And if you have 3 weeks before an interview, which one do I take? That's fantastic.
Okay, I would say CTCI. See, Coleman book is for learning algorithm, right? So they have the theory, they have the concept of algorithms. They don't have, of course, they have the questions, but they don't have the normal questions which are asked in the interviews. The CTCA book, the Cracking the Coding Interview book, contains the questions only. It doesn't have a lot of theory, it doesn't have a lot of concept. It has a list of questions which are common to the interviews, right? So if you know the theory thing, if you know the algorithms, if you know the DS, then you can go with the CTC book to revise those coding questions.
Okay, here's one more question from Jack that says, would interviewers like it if you show competitive coding style instead of clean one, like with the proper variables and stuff, like in an interview?
No. So again, the interviews are, I mean, the computer coding is quite different from normal interviews. In the interviews, they expect you to write clean code, like you should have better syntax, you should have the better function name, you should write clean compilable code. So it's not about competitive coding. In competitive coding, your code will be read by the machine. In interviews, the code will be read by a human, right? So you should write easy to understand code. And of course, in your office also, you'll be writing clean code with good variable names and good function names. So yeah, you should practice writing better code.
Definitely, sir. So the next one's again from Kurtax. What is the scope of Mern stack?
So Mern stands for, M is for Mongo, E is for Express, R is for React, and N is for Node.js. So it's a full stack development tool, and it's very easy to learn, and a lot of startups are using this thing. So it has a good scope, right? So you can easily get a job if you know these things. But as I said, like the big companies don't care much about your, this framework knowledge. If you know the DSNL, if you know how to solve a problem, if you know how to code, then you can get a job. But yeah, startups will, to get a job in the startups, these things can help you. So yeah, you can go with learning one stack, or you can go with the main stack, or you can go with Java plus React, or there are many things. You can go with the Python, Django. Yeah, so you can choose anyone. So yeah, one stack has a good scope.
Okay, sir. So the next one is from Swaraj. If someone is proficient in a language like MATLAB, what kind of company is likely to be hired in? So the job profile thing.
You should not stick to one language, right? Like when I was in college, I was doing coding in C++ mainly. when I joined Paytm, I was working on Java because my team was working on Java, right? When I joined Adobe, my main language was Java, but I was working on PHP also. I was working on Python also. I was working on JavaScript also. I was working on one language called NetSuite, right? So you will be working on multiple languages depending on the work, depending on the team. So you can't stick to one language, right? And the good thing is that, I mean, if you know one language, then you can switch to another language in 1 week because, I mean, you don't need to know the syntax, right? You will have the Google, so you can simply Google the syntax and you can write the code. So just know one language very well and then you can switch to another language easily. So language should not be a concern for anyone. Okay, so
but would the chosen language play any role in the type of job profile as he is specifically asked?
Yes, but see, I mean, okay, like if you see a profile like Java developer, it doesn't mean that you should know only Java. Java developer means you should know all the frameworks which are based on Java, like Spring, Spring Boot, and other things, right? Similarly, if someone are looking for Python developer, that means you should know Python language. Apart from the Python libraries, like there are a lot of libraries for Python, right? So, but again, I mean, if you know one language, let's say if you know C++, then you can switch to Java in 1 week. That won't take much time, right? So most of the companies won't care about your language. Like Microsoft uses C#, right? Like Microsoft has its own language C#, but you can get a job without knowing C#, right? Like Google uses Go, so you can get a job in Google without knowing Go. I mean, you can code in C++ or you can code in Java. Or let's say, I mean, so like Salesforce uses a language called Apex, which is similar to Java, but you can get a job in Salesforce without knowing that language, right? So, I mean, so the idea is if you know one language, then you can switch to another language in 1 week. So they don't care about your language. That's the truth.
I'm very clear now. So the next question says, as a full stack developer, is it important to have a great grasp over DS and algo to score a job?
Okay, so like right now, these big companies care about DS and algo. That's why you will have to know this thing to get a job, right? I mean, that's the pattern. So to get a job, you will have to study these things. But believe me, these things are interesting. These things will help you to be a good thinker. It will help you to be a good problem solver. It's not only about knowing the DS and algo. It's also about solving some problems. It's also about thinking about a problem. It's also about writing complete working code, right? So it's not only about DS and algo.
Okay, sir. One question from my side. Can you suggest a few ways to improve creative and critical thinking apart from the competitive coding that we do?
Build some project. So the one way is like you can do competitive coding where you'll be solving new questions. Another way could be you can learn a language, or let's say you can learn Java, and then you can try to solve a problem. Like let's say you want to build something like Google Meet, right? So let's see like, okay, how you can build something like Google Meet using Java. So what is the framework that is needed to build that tool? So if you're building something like that, then you will have a lot of problems, and then you'll learn like, okay, how to solve that problem, or how you can solve that problem efficiently, because the problem can be solved in multiple ways. So you'll have to go with the best way, right? So yeah, so building some projects will also be another way of critical thinking, or thinking, or I would say thinking very deep about something, like, okay, how I can do something, or what are the features I can add to that tool. So you have to pick something, learn a language, learn a library or a framework on that language, and then build something using that framework. Okay.
Okay, sure. I think DS and algo, if I'm not wrong, is mostly with the optimization of code and stuff. And if there is a problem given to me at an interview, and I am not coming up with the most efficient code, would that be an issue?
Okay. They expect you to reach to the best solution, but if you are not able to solve, let's say, one question in the most optimized way, that is fine, right? Because they know, like, okay, no one is perfect, right? So no one can solve every question. So you can, if you're not able to solve some question, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, you should know how to write code. You should know all the basic DS and algo, and you should be able to solve I would say 90% of questions.
Okay. So here's one from Zach. How much time per day should I dedicate to interview prep as a first year, second, third, and fourth? Like in hours, he wants to know specific situations.
Yeah. So okay. So in the first year or second year, you can simply learn the things that is being taught in your college. Like you can. So I think so. In your college, you will have one language like C or C++. Then you will have subjects like DS and Algo. You will have subjects like OS networking. So you can learn those things from your college. And then if you're starting preparation from third year, that is also fine. Like 1 year is more than sufficient to get a job. So you can start preparing for the interviews from the third year. And then I think 1 year is more than sufficient to get a job in any company. So once you will be in the fourth year, you will have a good grasp knowledge of all these things to get a job. Yeah, so for placement perspective, you can start from third year. But again, if you want to learn or if you want to do coding or if you want to build something, then you can start from the first year. That's good thing, right? So you can start building projects from the first year. You can start doing completely coding from the first year. But what I'm saying is, if you are late and if you're starting from third year, still you can get a job, or still you can be a good coder. Still you can build something good.
So I guess Pratyak's has his Amazon interview tomorrow, and he wants his.
Yeah, the best of luck, first of all. Because luck is very important to crack interviews, right? Because let's say, I mean, you can't revise all things. So if they are asking some new thing, then you won't be able to solve that question. So luck is important. So, okay, so for 1 day, what you can do is you can take a good sleep, be relaxed, and yeah, practice. I mean, or simply revise some questions or you can see the previous questions of Amazon, like, okay, what are the questions they have been asked in the interview, so that you can have the idea. So normally they ask the same, they repeat the questions. That's the good thing about the interviews. Companies don't very frequently ask new questions, right? So yeah, so you can revise those common questions of interviews, I mean, of Amazon. So that might help you.
All the best, Pratyak. And there's one question from Abhishek. Should we learn 2 languages at a time?
Okay, yeah, I mean, you can learn 2 languages. That's perfectly fine. Like, but to get a job, 1 language is sufficient. Like, you can learn. Let's say you can get a job by learning only 1 language, like C++ or Java. So that language should have support of object-oriented programming. So you can go with C++ or Java or Python. But yes, you can learn 2 or 3 languages as well if you have that much time, if you have that much interest. But the thing is, I mean, you can crack the interviews using any one language. But yeah, to build some project, you might have to use some other language. Like if you want to do front end, then you will have to use JavaScript, you will have to use other things. So for project building, you can use some other languages. But for coding, I mean, for DSA coding, you can stick to one language so that you can remember the syntax easily.
So the next question is from Avi, and I have personally faced the same issue in many cases wherein we are trying to work on the competitive coding, and there are time constraints, but sometimes we fail to answer the question, I mean, despite the time. So how do you resolve that?
Okay, so the idea of, I mean, if your code is giving TLE, that means time limit exceed, that means your code is not the most optimized code, right? You are not solving that problem in the best possible way, right? So that's why you are getting that TLE error. So the simple rule is, I mean, you can think harder, you can try to solve it in a better way. But if you're not able to solve that, then what you can do is you can wait for completion of that competition or that competitive coding challenge. At the end, you can see the solution to know, like, okay, what was the trick or what was the algo which you were missing. This is how you can learn things. This is how you can learn new things, right? So you can go through the solution of that problem to learn, like, okay, what was missing in that problem. Yeah.
So there's one question from Swaraj. What are the best platforms online to learn code from basic?
YouTube. You can simply go to YouTube and simply type like binary trees in English, in Hindi, in, I guess, in Tamil also you can find that. right? So that's the best way to start learning JSON algo. And then you can learn things, websites like Gigs or Gigs. See, the good thing about YouTube is you will have the visuals, you will have the video, you will have some graphics. So those things will help you to learn things easily. And then you can, for coding thing, you can start, you can go to Gigs or Gigs. And then you can start reading a book if you like to read a book, right? So that is the way to learn these things. For practicing coding, you can practice on Gigs for Gigs, you can try HackerRank, you can try CodeChef. So all these websites are good.
Certainly, sir. Okay, I think we're done with all the questions. Are there any more questions, guys? The audience section? Okay, so, yes, sir. We're done with all the Q&A section.
Okay, that's great.
So, it was really great having you with us, sir. It was very insightful. Thank you so much for being here with us today at IEEE CONCEPTO. We're truly honored with your presence. And I think, at least from now on, now that we have a clear idea on how important the essay is, we will not tend to skip it anymore. We'll try our best to learn it. So the next session is tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. That's the 30th of October 2020. And we look forward to all of your questions and participation. For more such exciting events, do follow us on social media handles. The links will be given on the chat box. And yes, until then, do sign up for all the things. And okay, I'm so sorry, sir, if we are not yet winding up. There's one other question. Can I continue?
Yeah, I can take that question. Yeah.
As an interviewer, what are your expectations from a candidate?
Okay, Akansha, the simple expectation is you should be able to write a code, right? Because in the company, mostly you'll be writing code. So you should know how to write a code that can run on a machine without any error. And that code should be solving some problem, right? So the idea is we test your coding skill. Apart from that, you should know like how things work, what is OS, how OS manages the process management, how OS do memory allocation, how networking. How, let's say, what is router and how it works, what is DNS, what is IP address, what is databases, what is tables, what is primary key, what is foreign key. So you should know the basic CS fundamentals, and you should know how to code, and you should know how to solve a problem. So that is the simple expectation from a fresher. Yeah. So you should be good at JSON, you should be good at coding, and you should know the basics of CS to crack the interviews.
We'll wait for a few more minutes, sir. Okay, yeah, there's one more rolling in.
Okay.
What's the best place on net to revise important topics on OS and networks?
Okay, for OS, there's a book called Galvin, the dinosaur book. So on the cover of that book, you will have an image of dinosaur. For networking, of course, you can watch some YouTube videos, or you can simply search those topics on net, like what is. So you can do one thing, like you can simply search the most common question of computer networks for the interviews, right? So you'll have a list of questions. The questions are like, what is OSI layer, what is IP4 and IP6, what is TCP, what is UDP, what is subnetting, what is masking, what is ARP, what is DNS, what is DHCP. So you should know all these basic terms. You should know what is the meaning of a port, what is the process, what is the application, how HTTP works. So you should know the basic things, right? So you can learn these things either from a book or from any blog like Gigs for Gigs, or there are many other websites where you can learn these things. And Kavya, I also enjoyed this session. Actually, I like to interact with the students, and I also enjoyed this session very much. So thank you for inviting me.
Totally, sir. Oh, we are truly honored. It was very insightful. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you.
Same thing again, guys. So the session is over, and thank you for all of your participation. We're looking forward to your presence tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Until then, this is Karapriya signing off at IEEE CONCEPTO. Thank you.